You've probably seen the headlines: another earthquake in the Philippines, buildings cracked, heritage sites destroyed, lives shattered. But here's what the news never shows you. Beneath those disasters lies one of humanity's most fascinating mysteries: ancient myths about dragons and giants, earthquakes that happen 100 kilometers underground, deeper than anywhere else on Earth, and a people who've been stress-tested by nature for centuries. There's a 500-year-old legend that explains everything. A giant named Bernardo Carpio, trapped between mountains. Every time he fights to break free, the ground trembles. And his story? It's not just folklore. It's the key to understanding resilience, adaptation, and why some people refuse to stay down no matter what hits them. I'm going to show you what scientists are discovering beneath the Philippines, what ancient myths reveal about human psychology, and how this applies to building freedom in an unstable world. But first, if you're looking to build income and freedom that can't be shaken, download my free Cruise Freedom Blueprint in the description below. It's designed for people who refuse to depend on one system, one location, or one paycheck. Let me tell you a story most of the world has never heard. Long before Spain colonized the Philippines, ancient Filipinos had their own explanation for earthquakes. Not tectonic plates, not scientific theories, giants, dragons, spirits. I share this with deep respect for the Filipino people, because these stories aren't just legends, they're lived experiences of strength. The most famous, Bernardo Carpio. According to legend, Bernardo was so powerful that even the gods feared him, so they trapped him between two massive mountains in Montalban, chained, buried, imprisoned forever. But here's the thing about Bernardo. He never stopped fighting. Every time he struggles to break free, the mountains shake, the earth cracks, buildings collapse, and Filipinos look at the destruction and say, "That's Bernardo. He's still trying." Now, other cultures had their earthquake myths too. In Visayan folklore, it's Bakunawa, a giant serpent that devours the moon and shakes the earth. The Ifugao people believed in Kolyog, the spirit of earthquakes. The Tagalogs spoke of Dumakulam, a sky god who literally creates mountains through tectonic forces. What blows my mind is this: these ancient stories weren't just superstition, they were early attempts to understand forces beyond human control. And they all shared one theme: the earth fights back, but so do we. When I first learned about Bernardo Carpio, I thought it was just a cool myth. But then I started paying attention to how Filipinos actually respond to earthquakes, and I realized they're living the legend. But here's what makes this even more incredible. The science beneath the Philippines is just as mysterious as the myths, and what researchers are discovering will change how you see everything. Now let me show you something that sounds like fiction but is 100% real. The Philippines doesn't just get regular earthquakes, it gets some of the weirdest, deepest, most scientifically unusual earthquakes on the planet. They're called intraslab earthquakes. Most quakes happen where tectonic plates meet, at the surface grinding against each other. But in the Philippines, they happen deep inside the plates themselves. We're talking 50, 60, sometimes 100 kilometers underground. Think about that. The earthquake isn't happening where two things collide, it's happening inside the rock itself, from internal pressure so extreme that solid stone fractures from within. Scientists are still trying to figure out exactly why this happens, but here's what they know. As oceanic plates slide beneath the Philippines, they release water and carbon dioxide through a process called slab dehydration. These fluids trigger both earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. That's why the Philippines has both, constantly. In 2025, two massive intraslab earthquakes hit within hours of each other. Magnitude 7+, deep underground, rare even by Philippine standards. Researchers from around the world flew in because events like this almost never happen anywhere else. Here's the metaphor that hit me. Imagine a steel beam under so much internal stress that it doesn't bend. It shatters from the inside out. That's what's happening beneath the Philippines. Constant, invisible, extreme pressure. And here's what got personal for me. I'll never forget watching footage after one of the recent quakes. The camera's shaking, buildings swaying, and in the background you can hear Filipinos laughing, joking with each other, completely calm. I sat there in my office, thousands of miles away, and thought, if that happened where I live, people would be panicking, screaming, frozen in fear. But these people? They've been stress tested their entire lives. They function under pressure that would break most of us. And that hit me harder than any earthquake footage ever could. That raised a question I couldn't shake. What happens to a culture when it's been adapting to chaos for centuries? The answer is hiding in plain sight. But first, let me show you what gets lost when the ground shakes. Here's something the headlines never cover. Every major earthquake doesn't just kill people, it erases culture. Spanish-era cathedrals that survived 400 years, gone in 30 seconds, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, cracked beyond repair, ancestral homes with stories carved into the wood, piles of rubble. In 2013, a 7.2 magnitude quake hit Bohol. It destroyed churches built in the 1500s, structures that survived pirates, wars, typhoons, colonization, obliterated. In 2022, Vigan, a UNESCO World Heritage City, lost over 100 ancestral homes. Not replicas, original buildings, 400 years of craftsmanship and memory. And here's the kicker. The 2012 Negros Oriental earthquake didn't just destroy, it physically altered the landscape. Entire coastlines rose several feet overnight. New landforms appeared, ecosystems changed. The earth literally rewrote geography. A Filipino colleague told me a story that stayed with me ever since. After the Vigan earthquake, his uncle's ancestral home collapsed. 400 years old, built by their great-great-grandfather, gone. When my colleague called to check on him, expecting grief, maybe anger, his uncle said something that stopped him cold. The house is gone, but we're still here. No bitterness, no despair, just acceptance. When he told me that story, something clicked for me. Filipinos understand what most of us refuse to accept. You can't build permanence in a world that constantly shifts. All those stone cathedrals, all that built-to-last architecture, doesn't matter when the earth decides to move. The only thing that survives? People, spirit, the will to start again. Now let me tell you about the earthquake that changed everything and why nobody saw it coming. August 17, 1976, the Moro Gulf earthquake, magnitude 7.9, middle of the night. Thousands of people felt the shaking, ran outside, and headed to the coast. Because that's what you do, right? Get to open ground. But here's what they didn't know. The earthquake had triggered a tsunami, 9 meters high, racing toward shore, and when the sea suddenly receded, exposing the ocean floor, people didn't run. They walked closer, curious, picking up fish. They'd never been taught about tsunamis. Minutes later, the wave hit. Over 5,000 people died, many of them standing on the beach, watching the water pull back. It remains the deadliest seismic event in Philippine history, and it changed everything. After 1976, tsunami education became mandatory. Warning systems were installed. An entire generation learned, when the sea pulls back, you run inland, fast. Here's what that taught me about resilience. It's not just about bouncing back from disaster, it's about learning, adapting, making sure the next generation survives what killed the last one. That's the pattern. Every earthquake teaches the Philippines something new. And they don't just rebuild, they rebuild smarter. UNESCO is now working with Vigan to restore those 100 ancestral homes using earthquake-resistant techniques that blend traditional craftsmanship with modern engineering. They're not just preserving the past, they're preparing for the next shake. And that brings us back to Bernardo, because his story isn't about being trapped, it's about what you do when you can't escape. So let's go back to the legend, Bernardo Carpio, trapped between mountains for 500 years, fighting, shaking the earth every time he tries to break free. Here's what most people miss. Bernardo isn't just a character in a story, he's a mirror. Every Filipino who's been told you can't, you're not enough, stay in your place, they're Bernardo. Colonized for 400 years, hit by 20 typhoons a year, earthquakes that come from 100 kilometers underground, trapped by geography, by poverty, by systems designed to keep people small. But they never stop fighting. And every time they refuse to stay down, the world shakes a little. I've felt that trap myself. The cubicle, the paycheck to paycheck grind, the belief that this was just how life works. Until one day, I decided to be Bernardo, to stop accepting the weight pressing down on me, to start shaking things until something broke. That's when I built the Cruise Freedom Blueprint, not because I wanted to sell something, because I needed to escape something. And what I learned is this: you can't wait for the system to stabilize before you make your move. The ground will never stop shaking, but you can build something that moves with you. That's what the blueprint teaches: how to create income that isn't tied to one job, one boss, one country. Check the link in the description. It's free, and it's designed for people who refuse to be trapped. Because here's the truth nobody tells you about breaking free. Breaking free is terrifying. When you've been trapped long enough, the cage starts to feel like safety. I remember the day I quit my job. Hands shaking, stomach sick. Everyone said, "You're crazy. You have stability, benefits." But I knew, if I stayed, I'd spend my life wondering what could have been. So I walked away, built my freedom, started traveling, and yeah, the ground shook. A lot. Months where I didn't know if it would work. Moments I thought I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But every time I wanted to quit, I thought about those stories, about my Filipino colleagues who faced real disasters, earthquakes, typhoons, losing everything, and still found a way to laugh. I thought about that uncle in Vegan saying, "We're still here." And I realized, if they can smile through literal earthquakes, I can handle uncertainty. Because here's the thing about Bernardo Carpio. He's been trapped for 500 years, and he's still fighting. Not because he's guaranteed to win, but because refusing to fight means accepting the cage. So here's what you need to understand. The Philippines sits on one of the most unstable pieces of earth on the planet. Earthquakes from 100 kilometers deep, typhoons every year, volcanoes, tsunamis, and it's still standing. Not because the ground is stable, but because the people refuse to stay down. They've turned disaster into data, mythology into mindset, trauma into teaching. That's the 500-year-old secret. You don't need stable ground to build a life. You just need to keep moving when it shakes. To every Filipino watching, thank you for reminding the world what true resilience looks like. If you're ready to stop waiting for stability and start building freedom that moves with you, download the Cruise Freedom Blueprint below. Hit that like button if this opened your eyes. Subscribe for more real talk about building unshakable freedom. And comment, are you ready to be Bernardo? The giant is still fighting. Maybe it's time you did too.